The art of witnessing, what does it mean and how can we apply witnessing into our daily lives? So, what I would like to do is, I would like to start off with a quotation, and the quotation is from Dr. Michael Newton. You've heard me take his name before. It's from his book Journey of Souls. Dr. Newton does regression therapy. So there's a quotation in his book, and I want to start out with that. And the quote is, I believe almost 3/4 of all souls who inhabit human bodies on earth today are still in the early stages of development. I know this is a grossly discouraging statement because it means most of our human population is operating at the lower end of their training. On the other hand, when I consider a world population beset by so much negative cross-cultural misunderstanding and violence, I am not inclined to change my opinion about the high percentage of lower-level souls on Earth. However, I do think each century brings improvement and awareness in all humans. So, this particular quotation that comes from Michael Newton's book, Journey of Souls, based on his research that he's done, based on the number of people that he regressed into past lives, he was able to determine this. Now, he has a category for souls. He says that there's a certain hierarchy. There are souls that go from a very basic level of consciousness to a very high level. So there are young souls, intermediate souls, and then older souls. And then enlightenment would be above that as well. So he's saying the great majority of the souls on this planet are young souls. So it's kind of like a pyramid where you have a wide base at the bottom. So the majority of the souls, young souls, are at the bottom. And then as the pyramid goes up and it meets right at the end, less and less people are actually at a higher level of consciousness. And then you have very, very few who are right at the top. So some of the symbols, some of the great legends and symbols of enlightenment would be Krishna, who is known as Vishnu Avatar, or the incarnation of God. Then of course there's Jesus Christ, Prophet Muhammad, Buddha, Sant Kabir, Guru Nanak, all these great entities who are at the top of the pyramid. The rest of the human population, or most of the human population, is at the bottom. So you always have a few, one or two, or a few at every moment, at every time in creation, to sustain the rest of the population at the bottom. So Michael Newton is saying that most of the world is operating at a basic level of consciousness, young souls. So that means that the world we're living in today is the world of young souls, if you look at it from another point of view. So what does the world of young souls look like? Well, just look around you. Mainstream media, you look at, when you open the TV and you watch the news, what do you see around you? All kinds of problems, right? Always something is going wrong. Somebody doing something bad, death, children doing something to their parents, parents doing something to their children, wars between different countries, domination, arms, control, dictatorship, however you want to see it. But if you want to go a little bit further than that, for a lot of us, our world revolves around celebrities, actors, athletes, people who are into sports. If you are living your life in a way where constantly your thoughts and your emotions have to be entertained by some kind of external force, then basically you're living in a state where you're going against the principles of witnessing or against the principles of spirituality. The idea is for you to live in this world and to be detached from it. So another word for witnessing would be detachment, to observe, to be neutral, not to be intimidated, not to be controlled. If you're going to live on this planet, live by the terms of detachment and witnessing, not by the terms of being dominated by an external force. This is what witnessing is essentially referring to. One of the great historical figures who mastered the art of witnessing was Buddha. And we've all heard the story of Buddha. But when Buddha was young, he was sheltered from the world of spirituality and the world of death, as you know. His father made sure that even a flower wasn't allowed to live and die in his presence, because when he was born, the clairvoyants and the astrologers had made a prediction that he will either be one of the greatest rulers, one of the greatest kings in the history of creation, or he'll become a mystic. He's going to renounce the world. These are opposite extremes. So the father asked the clairvoyant and the astrologer, what can I do? So the suggestion the father got from the clairvoyant was, shield him from the idea of death. Under any circumstance, do not let him know what death is. So don't let a flower die, don't let an animal die, don't let a human die in front of him. Just shield him from that idea. So he did that. And you've all heard the story of Buddha. There came a time when he grew up that he actually saw a funeral procession, and he saw that there are people dying. There is such thing as death. And the question to him was, is this going to happen to me as well? And he came to the realization that it was going to happen to him. Now, Buddha was looking for answers. He was looking for spirituality. He couldn't get them in the kingdom that he lived in. There weren't spiritual teachers who were prominent in that area. There was some. There was only so much that they could teach him. So he decided to renounce the kingdom and the world. And of course, he went to seek spirituality and seek for answers and to seek God. And then he went through a whole big journey, as you've heard. And then finally, he reached a state of samadhi and consciousness. And his individual consciousness merged with the universal consciousness. So the reason Buddha's story comes to my mind, and it brings a bit of a smile on my face, is that when you look at Buddha's story and when you look at the teachings of some of the Zen masters, the word Zen, by the way, comes from the word dhyan in Sanskrit. So the word Zen and the word dhyan are the same words. In Sanskrit, when the word dhyan traveled to China, it became Chen. And then when it traveled to Japan, it became Zen. And there are other words too in different languages. But essentially, the word Zen and the word Dhyan and the word witnessing that we're using today is one and the same thing. It just means to live in awareness. It means to live in detachment. It means to live in a way where the forces of the material world cannot push you or control you. In theory, it may sound easy, but in practice, it's difficult to do this. In a sense, you can say Buddha had to go from one world to another, from one extreme to another, to experience this. He went from a world of kingdom and material wealth, which he renounced, to a total world of seclusion, becoming an ascetic. Now, the idea is to find a balance between the two, between Buddha's two worlds. The idea is not to renounce the world. The idea is to live in the world and be detached and to seek Buddhahood. Live in the world and become a Buddha. So it's easy to say this, but it's difficult to achieve this. Okay, but essentially that's the goal. So the lessons that Buddha has left behind is not that different from the other enlightened masters. Prophet Muhammad said the same thing. You don't have to renounce and go to a monastery or into the jungle. No, you can stay in the world and seek God. Krishna did the same thing. Krishna was known as the incarnation of God, Vishnu Avatar. And one of the greatest and oldest scriptures today in the history of creation is the Gita. It's the wisdom that Krishna left behind, which took place in a battlefield, by the way. You would think that when wisdom is coming down, why not gather up all the sages, and all the scholars, and then let Krishna give all of them the knowledge? No, it came in a battlefield. So you would think it's a paradox. Where there's going to be bloodshed, the greatest scripture in the history of creation and the greatest wisdom is coming down, because there's a moment for everything, right? Spiritual logic is different from human logic. This is how it happened. Things happen in the moment. So anyways, Krishna is teaching Arjun, don't run away from your responsibilities. At this point in time, in this moment, your karma is to fight the war. Don't worry about what happens. Don't worry about the result. Even if you end up dying, don't worry. You're doing the right thing. So don't run away. Don't run away from the world. Don't run away from your responsibilities. Okay? But at the same time, while you're doing this, you have to stay conscious. You have to stay centered. Don't lose your consciousness. Become one with your soul, your spirit. So the idea here is, whether you look at the teachings of Jesus or Guru Nanak, or Krishna or Buddha, spirituality is the central part, right? It may come out in different words. It may come out in different methods and different variations and guidance, but essentially at the center, it's the same. Okay? So, different masters and different teachers will articulate it in a different way, but the central message is the same. You're going from form to formless. So the formless part is the same. Whether this scripture says it this way or this way, at the center it's the same. Okay? So the art of witnessing essentially means to live in the material world, but not to get influenced by it. Stay in the center. So quite often Zen masters use the example of a lotus. So you can have a lotus whose stems are going deep into the river, but the face of the lotus stays above the water. So the current of the lake and the water can be very powerful, and it sways the stem and the lotus from one end to the other. But the lotus doesn't sink. It keeps its head over the water. It survives. Also, the stem goes all the way down. It can go into the murky water. It can face all kinds of challenges, insects, animals, the wind, but it still retains its balance. So in a sense, if you become like a lotus, the face, our consciousness, stays above the water. So even though you're living in the world, you don't get sucked into it. You become free from the world. You're able to breathe. You can get shaken this way, you can get shaken that way. Your karma will make all kinds of demands. As a child, as a sibling, as a parent, from family members, from your partners. You have to go to work. You have to educate yourself. You have to put money on the table. You have to put food on the table. You have to work hard. As long as you're coming on this planet, there's going to be challenges. If you look at the words and the knowledge that a lot of healers and clairvoyants, they give you, all of them are saying that when you come on this planet, it's a very difficult place. You're coming here to learn. You're not coming here for a vacation. So as soon as you sign up to come on this planet, there's going to be difficulties. It's a given. There's going to be challenges. The question is, how are you going to approach those challenges? Are the challenges going to dominate you and destroy your consciousness? Or are you going to do it at your terms? You're going to take those challenges and you're going to try to face them consciously. That depends on you and that depends on me. The greatest gift that God has given to human beings is their free will. That's the greatest gift. God will show your free will the way. It will always send you messages of what to do and what not to do. But whether to do it or not depends on you and me. Okay? So the greatest gift that God has given to human beings is free will. But there's a great responsibility that comes with that too. So along with this gift, there's a great responsibility. It's using your free will consciously to move in a positive direction, to create positive energy, positive karma, not negative energy and not negative karma. That depends on us. Okay? So whether you look at the scriptures, the Christian scriptures, the Gospels, and what Jesus has said, or whether you look at Prophet Muhammad's saying or Krishna's, they all say that the great gift that God has bestowed on living beings, human beings especially, but it can even apply to animals and other forms of beings, is the free will. Okay? So that's the greatest gift that God has given us. But learning how to use that free will, good, bad, gray area, mistakes, good things, bad things, that depends on us. Okay? And there are multiple, many lifetimes. It's not just one lifetime. There's only so much you can learn in one lifetime. That's why there are many young souls. So is it true that God has chosen some souls and by the magic wand has made them young and very few made them old? Is this true? Of course it's not true. We all start out as young souls at one point. But how we want to grow, how we want to ascend, how we want to go up, that depends on us. There's a famous quotation by a very famous mystic. His name is Rumi, Maulana Rumi. And his teachings, one of his teachings are known as the Matnavi. And in his saying, there's a very famous quotation where he says, quote, "I was once in the form of a stone. Then I went into the kingdom of vegetation. Then I went into the insect kingdom. Then I went into the animal kingdom. Then I became a human. Where will I go next? I will become an angel. After that, I'll go even higher, to a higher realm, because even the angelic realm is limited. I won't stop until I taste the essence. So here Rumi is talking about his soul going through all these different stages from basic to a high level, and he says, I'm not going to stop until I reach the essence. Meaning, until my individual consciousness merges with the universal consciousness. So in the Vedas, there is a famous term, and it's called Aham Brahmasmi. I am the creator. It's a very advanced stage of consciousness. Once the soul reaches the pinnacle, a very high level of consciousness, it merges with the essence. So you may have a human body, but your internal consciousness is merging with the essence. The great Sufi mystic Mansur al-Hallaj used to say, Anal Haq, I am the truth. And they persecuted him for this, because in Islam, Haq, al-Haq, the truth, is one of the names of Allah, 99 names. So it was a conflict between Sharia and Hakikat, between the basic principles of Islam and deep spirituality, which goes way beyond logic. There was a conflict between the two. These are two different paths. Those who follow mainstream Islam or mainstream Christianity or Judaism, whatever you want to call it, the rules of mainstream Islam and just the orthodox version of any religion is limited to a basic level. Rituals, basic principles, laws, be good to yourself, be good to your neighbor, create good karma. These are the basic laws. But what Mansur and Rumi are talking about is on a totally different level. Your individual consciousness can actually merge with the universal consciousness while you're alive. But this will cause a conflict because the majority of the people will not understand this. And you can say out of millions and billions of people, only one will reach that stage anyway. So when Mansur expressed what was in his heart, that I am one with the truth, they basically killed him. Right? If you think it was hard and they put Jesus Christ on a cross, they did the same thing to him. And they were telling him, retract your statement. He said, I can't, because I've become one with essence. That's who I am. Aham Brahmasmi is the same thing. There's a very famous saying with the Sufis. They say, die before your death. If you die before your death, you don't exist anymore. No, they're not talking about a physical death here. Your body will still be there. It's the death of your ego, the death of your mind, the death of your individual consciousness into universal consciousness. Yes, this is what they're talking about. This is the ultimate message of any master. I'm sure Krishna told Arjun at some point, this is the ultimate goal, to merge into me, into the essence. Jesus taught that to his disciples as well. And Prophet Muhammad, in a very small group, used to share that too. And Prophet Muhammad used to say that, which, with every revelation that I give you, there are two meanings. External meaning, internal meaning. The external meaning I can share with you, with the masses, with the crowd. The internal meaning I cannot share with you, because if I do, it'll break your throat. Meaning, it'll put you into confusion. So it's better you stick to the external meaning. Now, if most of the souls on this planet are young souls, what's the point of the internal meaning for the young souls? You just go with the basic meaning and you learn and you grow. In school, you start from kindergarten and you go to grade 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, if you were in grade 2 and if I was to ask you, tell me in your words what you're learning in math or what you're learning in science at your level, tell me what it means. So they'll tell you according to the grade 2 level. If I ask someone in grade 6, they're also taking grade 6, they're also taking math and science, but their understanding is higher at a 6th grade level. Say you go to the 12th grade level now. It's completely different. They're both learning math, they're both learning science, but the level of understanding is different. Go to university, it changes. You go to a PhD level, it changes. Okay? So in the same way, the understanding of the soul and the understanding of spirituality, for young souls who are at a basic level, it's only limited to that specific level. For certain souls who go at an older level, the whole concept of religion, spirituality changes. So what Prophet Muhammad was saying, that there's an external and internal meaning. So maybe out of millions, he can pick out one or two where he can discuss the internal meaning with them. Because you have to be graduated to that level. So school, basically Earth is a school of learning with many, many different levels. You start out with kindergarten and then you grow. But as your soul begins to grow, there is a type of wisdom and awareness that comes inside of you that, you know what, why am I really here? Why am I wasting my time with all these things? Because none of these things are going to come with me in the end, right? When you die, what comes with you? What comes with you? By the way, this workshop is dedicated to my mom, who just passed away in February. And I believe strongly she's with us today, and she's laughing and she's smiling because she knows exactly what I'm saying now. Your family doesn't go with you, your body doesn't go with you, your wealth doesn't go with you. Your accolades, even if you collected, a master's or a PhD, it's not going to go with you. It's only two things that are coming with you: your karma, your energy in action, the way you made your choices with your free will, all your actions and all your karma. Karma is a Sanskrit word which means actions. Whatever you earned with your karmic actions, the way you treated others, the way you gave to others, the way you forgave others, your service, your humility. If there was anger, if there was control, if there was sadness, that's coming with you too. So your karmic energy is coming with you. And number two, the level of your consciousness. So when you come on this planet, if you are at this level when you were born, did you go a little bit higher before you died or not? Or did you go a little bit lower? Guess what? Either way, that's coming with you. Okay? If you read Michael Newton's book on regression therapy and life between lives, what you experience upstairs, all the near-death experiences, essentially this is what they're talking about. Raymond Moody is talking about the same thing. Dolores Cannon, same thing. Your karmic actions and the level of your consciousness goes up with you. That's it. Then when you go up, you reassess your previous life and you ask yourself, well, what could I have done things differently? Where could I have improved myself? What could I have done in terms of spiritual consciousness? What are my mistakes? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where can I improve? This is what you go through. So your soul is an individual level. Your soul is a tiny drop of light that comes from the universal essence. That tiny drop that's separated from the universal light has an individual consciousness and it has free will. And basically what God wants us to do is it wants us to take that tiny drop and develop it into a slightly bigger drop, a slightly higher level of consciousness, then a little bit more. And then it snowballs. So you start with a tiny snowball, that's what we are, and you build it up into a bigger one, and then a bigger one, and then to a bigger one. Meaning, step by step, lifetime by lifetime, you're building up your spirituality and you're coming closer to the essence. In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad referred to this as Inna lillahi wa inna lillahi rajiun, meaning that we come from God and ultimately we are supposed to return to God. Okay? Krishna referred to it in his own terms. Atma has to eventually merge with Paramatma. Individual soul or individual consciousness has to go into universal soul. Christ referred to it in his own way too. Seek for the kingdom of heaven within you, or go towards the kingdom of heaven. Same thing. So every master, Guru Nanak, Kabir, they've all talked about this in their own language, in their own unique terminology, but the essence is the same. They're basically saying, take your individual consciousness, grow it, increase it, and go towards the universal consciousness. This is where you come from. Your ultimate home is back into God's light. And this is what we're trying to do. And any sage or any healer or any master that comes down on this planet is trying to guide the finger towards the essence again. In case we've lost our way when we come down on the planet, they're trying to reset us. In case we've forgotten what our purpose is here, they're trying to remind us, wake up. Wake up from this deep sleep that you're in and pay attention. So, the art of witnessing ultimately is to detach you from the material world and the things that are around you, connect with your own spirit, and at the same time continue to live in the world, and at the same time be detached from it. That's basically what witnessing does. So witnessing can mean detachment, it can mean observing as well, it can mean stay away from the emotional body, stay away from the mental body, connect with your spirit. Generally speaking, we're talking about young souls here, for example, or most of the souls on this planet, we are living in body-mind consciousness. Either the consciousness is physical, or it's emotional, or mental. Physical, emotional, mental. We go from one emotion to another. Well, once in a while it can be happiness. Quite often it can be anger. It can be sadness. It can be control. It can be fear. We rotate, depending on the day, depending on the mood. Then it could be thoughts about your family members. You don't have enough money. Work. Pay the bills. Watch TV. Some good shows on Netflix, English Premier League, MMA, wrestling, whatever it may be, some form of entertainment. So inside here, you're constantly moving from one emotion to another, from one thought to another. In a span of 24 hours and almost 7 days a week, this is what's happening to us. Even when we go to sleep, you're closing your eyes, but this is not a sleep. Because your day-to-day activity, your day-to-day emotions and thoughts and pressures are still inside of you. And when you go to sleep, this is still going on. It's not resting. That's one of the reasons why today you have mental diseases, right? Everybody is talking about mental disorders today. It's even worse than physical ailments, right? Governments are spending millions and billions on mental disorders and diseases. Why? Because this thing here, the mental body, doesn't stop. The minute you get up from bed, you got your smartphone there, you got your computer, you got your TV. This thing starts. Until you go back to bed, this is still going. But the strange thing is that even when you're physically sleeping, this is not sleeping with you. There's no stop button here. So you have the physical part, emotional, mental, and spiritual part. So your physical body, if you're meant to live 70 years, for example, let's say you're meant to live 80 years, but you're using up your mental body in half that time, in 40 years. So by the time you hit 50 or 55 or 60, even though you're physically alive, you're kicking, mentally, this is expiring. So now you're running into mental diseases. This is one of the reasons you end up getting, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. You wonder why. So, because if you look at the wisdom of the masters, they say divide up your time and your energy in a way where your health is not just physical health, but your emotional, mental, and spiritual health are counterparts that you have to focus on as well. If you're living your life with only physical, emotional, and mental consciousness, there's thousands of thoughts inside of us, there's hundreds of emotions inside of us, and then we have our physical body. There's no question about the spirit for a lot of us. I think my mom is here because one of the spoons is shook by itself. Where is the time to focus on your spirit? Where is the time? So shutting the mind off and shutting the body off and shutting your emotions off, not only is it healthy for you, you'll be able to live a happier and healthier life, but you'll be able to connect with your spirit more often. So if you become a witness and if you detach from your emotional body, your mental body, your physical body, and the things around us, time off from TV, time off from the computer, time off from social media, time off from your iPhones. 15 to 30 minutes a day. Detach from everything. Become a witness. Go in. Connect with your spirit. It'll bring you back into balance. Okay? So witnessing here doesn't mean to run away from the world because the forces are so great. No. You need to live in the world because that's part of your karmic responsibilities. I normally say there are two major responsibilities that God gives us before we are born. Okay? The two responsibilities, one of them is your worldly responsibility and one is your spiritual responsibility. Your worldly responsibility, we can say, can be broken down into many components. Okay? All right, from the time you're born, your parents say that you need to educate yourself and you need to go to school. Okay, so that's part of a responsibility. It's not easy to do that, but we have to do that. As you're growing up, eventually you get into relationships. That is still, in my opinion, a worldly responsibility. Okay? So you have relationships with your parents, then you have relationship with your partners, and then eventually you'll go on to become parents too. These are all responsibilities, but they're still on the worldly level. The reason I'm saying worldly is because these responsibilities are around you. It is part of your family, social, economic, whatever you want to call it, survival. Okay? So you're fulfilling your responsibilities to look after yourself on a basic level, provide food, provide shelter, the basic existence, whatever you need for yourself, for your family members. If it's your children, you have to provide for them. If you have to look after your parents or any other family members, these are part of your worldly responsibilities. But over and above that, you have spiritual responsibilities. That spiritual responsibility, in my opinion, is even much greater than the worldly responsibility. You and me have the responsibility of nurturing our soul, our inner consciousness, working on our karma, going towards the universal light, which is where we came from. So quite often what happens to us is we use the excuse that we have worldly obligations and responsibilities, so I don't have the time to look after myself. I don't have the time to sit in silence because I have to look after my kids and I have to pay the bills. This is called using your worldly responsibilities as an excuse or a catalyst and not working on your soul. You have to work on your soul. They're both connected. It is possible for you to fulfill your worldly responsibilities before you leave this world. It is possible you'll fulfill them, but you won't fulfill any spiritual responsibilities towards your soul. A lot of people do that, especially young souls. So when we go upstairs, we come to the realization, why did I do all that hard work? Because I didn't do anything for my soul. I worked hard. I made a lot of money. I looked after myself. I looked after my kids. I did everything for everyone else, but I have nothing to take up for myself. My spiritual account is still low. So if you look at the wisdom of the sages, whether it's Krishna or Buddha or Prophet Muhammad or Jesus, they're always saying to focus on the spirit, the kingdom of heaven within you, your Atma, your Paramatma, individual consciousness, universal consciousness. Prophet Muhammad saying that you actually come from God and you have to return to God. But the godliness that's inside of you, you're not paying any attention to that. So the art of witnessing essentially makes you aware that there is something much more to your life than all this stuff that you're doing, this everyday life. Okay? Your children who you're taking care of, who you could dedicate your whole life to, they're individual souls. They'll be gone one day. When it's time for you to go up and for me to go up, your kids are not coming with you. In fact, your kids are coming with their own separate mission. As they grow up, they'll have their own path, which will be independent of you. Right? So that focus of developing the soul and developing your spirit, we lose touch with that. We're forgetting about that. We're forgetting that apart from physical, emotional, and mental consciousness and all this material stuff that's around us, including material responsibilities, there is something much deeper and much greater within us. That's the spark of the divine light. That's the spark of God that we need to focus on. And today, a lot of people are talking about past life therapy and regression therapy and reincarnation. You don't just have one or two lives. You have thousands or even millions of lives. It's just that we don't remember it. We talked about this last time. We kind of like we're living in a box. But the box is there for a reason too, so that we can make the maximum growth from this lifetime. But if you're living in the box with physical, emotional, and mental consciousness, and your box doesn't include your spirit or spirituality or the essence, what is your box worth? You have to become aware of that spark that's inside of you, the essence. So the art of witnessing is simply pointing a finger that when you detach from the things around you and you become an observer and you separate yourself from your physical, emotional, and mental body, it gives you that opportunity, that little gap, that little distance, gives you the opportunity to connect with your spirit and with your essence. So if you can live your life as a witness, it can allow you to experience a maximum level of growth. So when you go to work, remind yourself these are all individual souls that are working hard to make a living, to provide for themselves. But essentially, they're all individual lights that come from God. When you're driving with other people around you, remember these are not just physical people driving. These are individual souls that are in a car. But the most important thing is that these are individual spirits and souls. So you have to focus on that. When you give birth to your kids or when you become parents, You're biologically their mother and their father, but you didn't give birth to their soul. Their soul still comes from the light of God. Respect that. So even your kids are individual souls in reality. They're not your biological children only. So if you become over attached to the biological and the physical and the human part and you forget about your spirit, then you lose track of the essence. So witnessing is teaching you to do that again. These are individual souls that have come through you as a mother or a father, but they don't come from you, they come from God. And they're still going to go their own way. Either they'll go before you or you'll go before them. Hopefully you go before them and they live a nice life. You have no control over that. But the point is that you have to be focused on their spiritual aspect, not just the physical aspect or the biological aspect. Spirituality goes beyond motherhood and fatherhood too. You have to remember that. So witnessing, when you, whatever activity you're doing around you, whether it's going to work or with your family members or your kids or your children or your grandchildren, try to remember that these are all individual souls who have come down for a short time. From a distance, look at what they're doing, witness what they're doing, but don't become attached to it. Make sure your awareness and your consciousness is one with your spirit, and be aware that this world, the material world, with all the things in it, with your money and your accolades and your family and everything else, is a temporary place for us. And the real part of you is not what you see around you. The real part of you is inside of you. And witnessing allows you to approach that inside part of you. So witnessing basically just keeps you aware at all times. If you're living your life in a way where you book your, you think about, okay, so today I have some time. Let me think about what I'm going to do next week. There's this game on, football and soccer. There's this game on, hockey, right? And then, there's this show going to be on. This movie is going to be coming out. Then I'm going to spend some time with my kids over here. And then we're going to go maybe to a cottage, on this day. So if your life is constantly revolving around this, your entire life can swing by in a moment, 60, 70, 80 years, where you're just chasing one thing after another. A lot of us do this, right? If you look at our timetable and what we're scheduling in the future, this is what it revolves around. So our satisfaction, this means that our peace and our satisfaction and our enjoyment basically comes from these things, right? So we're pre-choosing all these things ahead of time that, this day this is going to happen, this day this is going to happen, this day this is going to happen. So emotionally and mentally, you're secured. It's a form of entertainment. It's a form of engagement. But if you live your life this way, where is the time for you to detach and focus on your soul? Where is the time to do that? So your entire life could go into this. So there's a very fine line between living in the world and being detached from it. Now, I'm also not saying that you shouldn't do any one of these things. You need to be able to use the phone and the computer and the TV. It's okay to watch the weather and the news. Although if you watch too much of the news, it can make you depressed too. Then all these bias and political bias. The whole point is, watch it as a witness. Watch it with a little bit of space, a little bit of distance. Don't get too involved. This is the point I'm making. So you can live in the world and you can do these things, but there's a big difference between doing it with emotional and mental consciousness and attachment and doing it with detachment, with a little bit of space. Essentially, the main reason you're here is to grow your consciousness. What Dhyan and Zen is referring to, that's what you're supposed to do. Okay? But you don't have to become very extreme. You don't have to take a very extreme path. I've heard even with the story of Buddha after he reached enlightenment, and he used to say that if I was able to find a guru or a spiritual teacher in my own kingdom who could have taught me this, then I wouldn't have had to go into the woods and into the jungle because I went from one guru to another. And in the end, I was looking for God for outside and I found him inside myself. Right? There is no God outside, it's inside of you. It's just that you're not aware of it. So the whole point of witnessing is for you to become aware of what's around you, number one, and then create a little bit of distance or a little bit of a separation, number two. And once that distance is there, then it doesn't matter what activity you're doing in your life, the focal point, the center point within you will be your spirit, because nothing from the outside Nothing from the outside is controlling you, because there's a little bit of distance and a little bit of detachment. The problem is that when you become attached through your emotions and your thoughts, especially to material things, that's when you're going in a direction where you're not going to grow. And your entire life can pass in this. But the minute you detach from that, emotionally and mentally, you create a little bit of separation. And that understanding, that basic understanding that I'm here for a reason, I'm here to grow. So I have to keep some distance and some energy for myself so I can go within and work on my soul. If that basic understanding is there, then you can approach life in a much more constructive way. Then it becomes a Zen life, it becomes a Dhyan life, it becomes a meditative life. As opposed to just living your life as a robot, going from physical, emotional to mental to emotional to physical, back to emotional, back to mental. These three dimensions, you're not coming out of it. And your entire life can go in that. Now, what Michael Newton refers to as young souls, in my opinion, is basically just that. Young souls, meaning their life, their entire life and their entire existence and what they do is either physical, emotional, or mental. It's just surrounding around these three dimensions. And what you need to do is you need to come out of that. Okay? So, as usual, I don't really prepare for what I'm going to talk about. I just let it happen in the moment. So in this moment, this is what happened, and I hope that you were able to connect to it, in some way. And like I said, if you have any questions, please make a note of them, and at some point, hopefully, we can address them. And as Noreen is always reminding me, towards the end, if you have to go, because I know all of you have a schedule, don't worry. I won't feel bad. But you can send me the questions after as well. You can email me anytime. But of course, we're still continuing our session. But towards the end, if for some reason you have to go, it's fine. It's not a problem. And for those of you who can stay, we'll have our question and answer and our sharing circle as well. Okay, so we will continue now with the next part of our workshop.